I'm really happy to be here today. I had the chance to visit Israel twice. Once as a part of a research team with Amy Camerdies and a number of other folks that we worked with in looking at religion in children's books, and then I was able to visit for a conference. So I'm happy to see you all virtually. So the study that I completed, this is something I completed last year, and I'm now in the stages where I'm thinking of expanding. So I would love to hear your insights. So last year I decided to take a look at the national conversations that were happening in the United States surrounding issues of belonging and who belongs in this country, who should be kept out, who is a real American, who deserves to be here. All of those conversations were erupting on the national stage, but then it also connected to what was happening in families and classrooms and with children. So I became aware of this push towards producing children's books along the themes of belonging from a student. One of my students shared a recently published book, and it was the book "We Are All Welcome Here," and I thought, interesting. And so what I did was I looked at children's books that were published in the United States since 2016, and books that dealt with issues of belonging. And I realized that there were quite a number of recently published children's books. And I personally, I don't think that that's a coincidence that authors are tackling these big sort of national issues, and I would suggest international issues and they're trying to talk about these issues in a way that children can take part in the conversation and also in some ways feel comforted and empowered to see a better or a different future. So I found 17 children's books published just in that short amount of time that had themes of belonging. And this idea of the importance of belonging is actually, it's grounded in the belongingness hypothesis by Baumeister and Leary. And I'll just read their quote. "Human beings are fundamentally and pervasively motivated by a need to belong. The desire for interpersonal attachment may be one of the most far-reaching interrogative constructs currently available to understanding human nature." And realizing that this desire to belong is something that I believe children's authors are theorizing in juxtaposition to this international and national push of more isolation and factionism. So here's what I did. I took a look at the children's books. They were all picture books. That was one of the defining features. I found, quite a number of books that were recently published. So I looked at that 2016 as the sort of the cutoff due date as far as publication. I looked at each book individually, read them at least 4 times, coded themes. I also took a look at the picture books. That's one of the reasons why, took a look at the illustrations. That's one of the reasons why I chose picture books, because you have that excellent way of conveying meaning in a visual sense as well. And as a result of reviewing all of these books, I discovered that there were 4 common themes, which I'll talk a little bit about. Additionally, and I'll share these resources with you, I developed a resource guide for each of the books that my pre-service teachers could use. If they chose to use one of the books in their classroom, they could use this resource to develop instructional plans and activities with their children. So I'm going to share all of that with you in a second. Here's the slide. So I have 2 QR codes, and I have these also at the very end of the PowerPoint. But let me just quickly click on the link. Let's see if it'll allow me to share this. Yes, I believe I'm still sharing it. So the first link will take you to a list of all of the books that I used in the study with a short summary. And then if you click on the image, it will take you to Amazon, so you can, see in terms of purchasing and that sort of thing. So that's what the first link takes you to. And let me get out of that. The second link will take you to my Google document with all of the resources. So I have the children's book. If I could find the author's website, literature guides, lesson plans, activities, if there was a read aloud option, I included, as much as I could find concerning each of the books. So that resource is there for you. So that was a part of my development process, to not only look at the books, but also look at the ways teachers were using the books in the classroom. Okay, so here's what I found, and this was not a surprising finding for me, but I was surprised to find how explicitly some of the books challenged some of the ideas of exclusion. So let me just break that down for you a little bit. A number of the books addressed issues of resistance in very direct ways. For example, the book that I have a screenshot of in the bottom corner, Arielle is a Dreamer, highlights the journey of a little girl who is immigrating here, I believe from Central America, and she's an undocumented immigrant. And it's her process of wanting to become a US citizen and what that's like. So that is in direct resistance to the narrative of, build the wall, keep out all of the people that are trying to come here. So I was surprised to see the number of books that were very explicit in their resistance. Other books were also pushing back against this narrative of exclusion. And one example is this idea of everyone is welcome and there's enough room for all of us. So the big umbrella, I think, gives that, uses that metaphor of belonging in a way that I think pushes back against the idea of exclusion in a way that is not as direct as Arielle is a Dreamer. And then other books sought to normalize difference and to talk about belonging in a way that was a little more, maybe it was in the illustrations more so than in the text. It was just normalized. So in one of the classrooms, or I'm sorry, in one of the books that says We Are a Family, and it highlights children in the classroom, and you can see children from a variety of backgrounds represented in that classroom. So it's not explicitly mentioned in the text, but it's pervasive in the illustrations. So in different ways, these books were sites of resistance. There were also books that that did one of two things. Some of the books seem to really affirm and highlight the ways that were similar to one another, and that was the core of what belonging looked like. Other books seem to highlight and celebrate difference as a way to show that we all can belong, and our differences actually make us unique, and that is what allows us to belong. So it's the two sort of different ideas of belonging, both represented in a number of books. And that's actually what led me to my themes. So what I'm going to do is I'll talk about the 4 themes that I noticed, and then I'm going to focus in on theme 3, because I feel like that's maybe the next step in my research. So the first theme that was represented in a number of the books was this idea of belonging connecting to notions of family or home. So in one of the books, Our Class is a Family really highlights this idea of, we belong because we're together in this space, and that is what makes us belong to one another. We're a family. The second theme that I noticed in not all of the books, but a number of the books, was this desire to redefine what it means to be an American, and to actually use symbols of of the United States as unifying symbols. So, for example, a number of the books use the symbol of the Statue of Liberty to highlight the history of the United States as welcoming immigrants, and that connecting to ideas of belonging. So there were a number of recently published books that focused on that as well. The third theme, and actually this was the theme that was used in most of the books, and I have the actual number there. I believe it was 13 out of the 17, was to highlight and sort of redefine difference as strength and a source of pride. And encouraging children to verbalize how they're different and to be proud of that, and to use that as a unifying factor. So we'll talk about that in a few slides. And then the last theme was the natural world as an example to follow. So a number of the books connected to the ways that animals are different from one another and how they still are part of the same ecosystem, and that idea of belonging. So the chart that I have here highlights all of the books that I used in the study, and then those 4 metaphors, and then some of the images that best connect to that. So you can see here that the third theme was most commonly used. It was used in almost all of the books, I think, aside from maybe 4 texts. This idea that difference is a source of strength. And that's the theme that I'd like to think about a little more. And I would love to hear your thoughts, and having a global audience, how you're considering this and your perspective. So I'm excited. So I'll definitely make sure I finish talking so that you have time to do that. So in critiquing or in considering theme 3, 13 out of the 17 books utilize this theme. And from my perspective, this is definitely has more of an individualistic focus, right? So here's an image from the book Odd Dog Out. And this is towards the end of the book, after the dog had tried to fit in and tried to change his appearance to match everyone else. At the end of the book, the dog decides that he will blaze a trail and be who you are, and really celebrate his individual uniqueness. And as someone who maybe comes from an individualistic culture, and I look at that and I think, yes, that's a fabulous way to explain this idea of belonging to children. Be proud of who you are. You can stand out in a crowd. Like that's the way that as a class we can move forward. And my question, and something that I've been sort of contemplating, is might this theme most resonate with children that come from individualistic cultures who are encouraged to stand out and to blaze their own trail and to be who you are. And I wonder if this message is understood by children that might come from more collectivist cultures, and that this message may not actually bring them any sense of belonging, that this might actually push back against what their own desires might be. So that's one of the critiques that I have, or one of the questions that I have in looking at these books. While I definitely believe that the motivation behind them and the desire is resistance and to build senses of belonging, I'm wondering how that message transfers to different groups of students. Further directions, I'm curious. I'm curious if I love to hear from children, right? Like, so, reading the books to a group of students and to have focus groups and to ask them, like, what do you think about the dog in this story? Like, would you feel comfortable talking about ways that you're different from one another? Which book makes you feel better about ideas of belonging? Those types of conversations with children. I'd also be curious to talk with classroom teachers to find out, how they utilize literature like this in their classrooms, and what themes might make the most sense for their students. And there might be differences based on the age of the children, based on the environment, school climates, that kind of thing. And I'm also curious the differences between individualistic and more collectivist cultures, and how the books are received by children and teachers in the classroom. So my hope is to think about belonging as a very complex, multi-layered idea, and that there are different theories and ways of describing belonging that may or may not be helpful in trying to push back and resist this idea of alienation. So I'm hoping that this might be a catalyst for new conversations surrounding belonging, and also thinking about really being intentional and thinking about how we theorize belonging in our schools. And possibly it's, both, it's not just an one or the other, it's a both and idea of also taking into account collectivist and individualist theories of belonging. And yeah, so I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts, and I'd love to have some time to talk about this. Here are my resources again. And you know what, actually, maybe I'll go, yeah, maybe I'll leave it at this slide as we're chatting. And if you would prefer the links, I'm happy to send those to you as well. Feel free to send me an email.